Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of Off the Cuff. As per usual, this is a series of audio podcast recordings, whatever you want to call them, where I just talk about some of the stuff I've been hearing about, some of the stuff I'm interested in, and just share my thoughts on them. Most of it's current event stuff, but some of it's not too current. And a lot of it is not factual statistics. I'm not backing a lot of it up, but I do have a lot to back up what I do say. So if you want to see anything, if you want to see the proof or reasoning behind any of these stuff I say, then just please do comment down below, and I will provide various comments. I'll also be providing links to anything I talk about if there is a link applicable. Now, to start off the show, I don't know if it's a show, but I wanted to talk about this article I saw just a few weeks ago, and it was titled, "My white friend asked me on Facebook to explain white privilege. I decided to be honest." Now, without going into the details of this article, I just wanted to cover some of the things that this girl goes on about. She mentions, that institutional racism exists, and all these are examples of white privilege and institutional racism. Now, here's the thing to note: institutional racism means it's something that's like it's part of an institution. It's part of a massive structure. It's not just an individual being racist towards you, because that's individual racism, which is obviously a bad thing, but there is no institutional racism. And she actually proves that. So the kind of examples she gives, and I'll obviously link to the article, she talks about how when she moved into a new neighborhood, there were some boys who started throwing rocks at her and her mother. So when she was a child. She was 3 years old, and there was these boys throwing rocks. Now, never mind that she's 3 years old, so she's heard the story secondhand, no doubt. There's no way of knowing why those boys did it, because she doesn't explain why the boys did it. But even if those boys did do it for racial reasons, that's not institutional racism. She talks about being welcomed into the neighborhood and not being harassed. That's what they wish. That's what white privilege is about: is moving into a neighborhood and not being harassed. I could tell you, white or not, plenty of people move into a neighborhood and get harassed regardless of their race. Being harassed by some boys, who, by the way, the boys were scolded by their parents for doing this. So these kids did not get off scot-free. Their parents didn't go, "Oh, well, they're black, so who cares?" None of that happened. So, first example, we're not off to a great start. And many of these examples were like that. Another one was where when she got into Harvard, a lot of people were saying to her, Harvard in, I think it was Massachusetts. I don't know. Yeah, Harvard, the one in Massachusetts, Harvard in Massachusetts. A lot of people were quite incredulous about it. Which, yes, that could be racist. There could be racial undertones, like, oh, a black person got into Harvard. But who knows? She is literally hearing people say that, and even after they congratulate her on it, instead of saying, "I don't believe you," they congratulate her, and she still thinks, "Oh, that was clearly racism." And some people believe that she got into Harvard because she was black, and it was like, what's it called again? The affirmative action. And yeah, it could have been affirmative action. Probably wasn't affirmative action. Sounds like she worked very hard for it. But here's the thing: is if affirmative action didn't exist and everything was equal, because people thought it was affirmative action because black people get an advantage because of that. I can actually link you to another article I read about, I think Jordan Peterson linked to it in one of his newsletters, about the dark secrets of public education. There's actual kids who think, "Oh, well, because I'm black, I can work a bit less and I'll still get into the same university." So, but again, even if those kids did think that she got in because of affirmative action, that's individual racism. Those would be racist kids. But there's no evidence of it. A lot of it is just her thinking because they said that because of her race. And then it's an absolute, like, every single example is her thinking. Like, for example, the seniors in Harvard were called masters, dorm masters, and she sees this as a racial thing. It has absolutely bloody nothing to do with race. The idea of masters goes beyond race and slavery. It's not about that, and you're so conceited to think that it's all about you, don't you? You know, honestly. And then there was another example where there was a white male boss that she had. She writes white male boss, and he told another writer in the staff that he thought she was conceited, and that she didn't know as much as she thought she did. And so he was, he was incredibly disrespectful and dismissive of her, and that was quite harsh. He shouldn't be doing that because he's hired her or whatever, he's brought her on, and honestly, yes, he was being a bit of a dick. But here's the thing: months later, he said that he'd come to respect and rely on her, and he apologized for prejudging her because she was black. So he said, "I realized I was black. I realized I thought that because you were black. I realized that I judged you, and I apologize. I'm very sorry for that." That's me. I'm paraphrasing, but And she said to him that he's ignorant and clearly has a lot to learn. Now, it says a lot about a person if they're not willing to accept an apology. And so just reading through this entire thing, I get the entire impression the whole time that she is got her head up her own ass, and she sees everything through the lens of racial tension and racism. And so the only person who's being racist or thinking that there's racism going on is her, even when it's not. The funny thing is, humans are amazing at pattern recognition. We do see patterns everywhere. That's why we end up believing a lot of bullshit, a lot of conspiracies, because we see the pattern as soon as it's pointed out to us. You can see that with the new car syndrome. When you get a new car and you see that car everywhere, it's because suddenly you notice it. Whereas before it was just another car. And I could find many other examples that are actually more scientifically proven, but one example would be here is if you make something a part of your identity, such as your race, you will notice when things like that come up. I've noticed that when I learn a new word, I hear that word all the time. It's because before I never really paid attention to it. So yeah, I find that ridiculous. So I'll link to that article, and I'll link to the article I mentioned about the public education and the kids trying to not work as hard, because that's honestly got to be in there. Now, this other article that I came across was... it was about something they want to do with the garments, and I'll try and get the exact article. So it was on BBC News. They were talking about adding a penny to clothing to try and basically be more, because clothes are getting thrown away. They wanted to find ways to fund recycling the clothes and making them reused and so on. So here's the problem with that. Okay, so yes, it's only a penny. It's not much. It's hardly anything. It's not a big deal. But the real problem there is that you're punishing the consumers, because ultimately it's the consumer who's going to have to pay more for their clothing. And so right off the bat, that assumes that the consumers are the one at fault here. And actually, the article, which I'll find again, does actually assume a lot of. Does assume it's the consumer's fault, that the consumers need to work harder to recycle. Now, I came across an article not too long ago that talked about the actual impact that recycling and as consumers, as individuals, the amount of impact we actually have. And it is so insignificant, it's unbelievable. I think it's like 2%. Globally, we're having 2% of an impact. Because the real harmful businesses in that, so the real harmful players in global warming and climate change and on are the big massive companies, and they're not getting punished for it because they punish the consumers ultimately. And yes, you could talk about shifting the market, but that's not going to happen. You're going to really, really work hard. And honestly, I find the whole penny on the garment thing, it's like I say, it's not really going to have that big effect. It's not really going to fix things. And so the way I read it is it's virtue signaling, just plain and simple. They just want to feel good about themselves, feel like they're making a difference. That's what the whole recycling thing is in the end. It's you going, look at me, I'm a good person, I recycle. It's like, good for you. You're doing absolutely fucking nothing. You're not helping. Now, in terms of what we can actually do, there's a great book called Cradle to Cradle. It's definitely worth a read. It's not too long of a book, and it's written by these two guys who one's a I believe he's not a chemist. That wouldn't be the right word to use. He's into chemicals and such, and the other guy is a I actually forget now. I need to reread the people involved. This is one of the problems of doing stuff off the cuff. But yeah, so basically it's two guys. They both have their own fields. One guy works more in manufacturing. The other guy's more of a scientist. And they both work together to create. They talk about changing the ingredients we use, changing the way we build stuff and make stuff. So as a factory, rather than making something to be killed, to be destroyed, to die after 10 years or 5 years, you design it and build it, and everything that goes into it is planning for the next life of that product. And it's a very well written book, and I did really think about that because you change the mentality and how you build stuff, and it works quite well. There's another article actually I was reading ages ago. It was called "They Used to Last 50 Years," and it's just this guy. He's going over washing machines and a few other large scale appliances, and he just compares how stuff from the 1970s is still working fine, whereas you can see that landfills and scrapyards are filled with these washing machines from only 5 years ago. And that's because of planned obsolescence, really. They design stuff horribly. Like some of these washing machines, he talks about how the parts used to be painted, so they'd be dipped into the paint rather than sprayed or anything, whereas the new ones are sprayed. And so the problem with it is that the old washing machines would get dipped into it, and so they would completely be covered. Every single area would be covered in paint. But the spray ones are thinner and thicker in various areas, and what that means is more rust. And the materials have changed, the quality has changed, and so ultimately the stuff is designed to be destroyed, and that is what's contributing to climate change. That's definitely a bigger effect, is actually the actual production of everything. And there's been this whole shift now where we don't try and repair and mend stuff as often, at least not to my perspective. I mean, I've got my computer, and I never pay for anyone to repair my computer, and I certainly don't buy a new computer lightheartedly, and I'll try and repair everything. If I break something, I'll get a new part for it and I'll replace that if I can't fix it anyway, and I'll just try and save money wherever possible, because ultimately it's cheap to do that. But I've realized with clothing, I'm much more quicker to throw it out. And perhaps rather than penny on a garment, we ought to try and push people to try and actually fix their clothing. Why not instead of spending a penny on garments, try and get sewing kits and training for sewing out there. Because there's an actual article I read, I need to find it, where this guy said that he was I won't be able to find this article because I can't remember the name, but this guy said that he was just going through his work day, and he noticed that he had a little rip right next to his collar, and he thought, oh, that's quite bad, I need to mend that, I should mend that. And then he realized he knew nothing about mending. And that's the kind of thing I'm on about, is, I know nothing about mending myself. I know a little bit about sewing, but every time I've tried to sew, it looks horrible, and it breaks within 2 days, so it's not worth it. Anyway, another little thing on the climate change is I saw this article on the BBC News. It was about how lab-grown meat may be worse for the environment. Now, this article made me chuckle a bit. The logic that they had was that lab-grown meat might be worse because the energy used, the electricity and so on, will be worse. So basically, when you increase the amount of meat being made in a lab, they're going to require more electricity and require more energy, and that energy will come from various fossil fuel power plants and so on. So it's going to increase energy consumption and so on. That's a bit of a crap argument. It's a really crap argument. Because I could counter so many things. Because it assumes that while the meat industry grows into this whole lab-grown meat thing, it assumes that the electricity industry, that the power generation industry is not going to advance as well, because it is advancing. And it's being a bit stifled by people who insist on only sticking to certain avenues, such as wind power and tidal power, where there are other opportunities. But it is advancing as well. And clean energy is becoming much more of a focus. So to say, to bring about this fear, there's always this fear that's going on, it may be worse. Do you have any idea how fantastically amazing lab-grown meat is? That concept, the idea of growing meat from stem cells, that's just absolutely insane. I'm not saying yes, just accept it as gospel and be like, yes, this is amazing, we must not question it. No, question it. But don't go around saying, it may be worse for the environment. Then by that logic, anything could be worse for the environment if it has a possible knock-on effect. That's just ridiculous. Now, so another thing I wanted to cover actually was, this article just made me chuckle. So basically, the Maduro government in Venezuela have announced that they are going to hold a rival concert to Richard Branson's concert. So Richard Branson is he's running this whole event to try and raise money to open up the borders to emergency aid and basically help ease the lives, make the lives better of Venezuelans. Now that's a nice cause in itself. And what I found really funny is I just went through this whole article on The Guardian, and it's going on about how Maduro is gonna hold a rival concert, and he doesn't actually say what his concert is about or what his goal is in this concert. And I just found that so laughable because it's just like, oh yeah, you're holding a concert? Well, we're gonna have a better one. Makes me think of that thing from Futurama with Bender saying, with blackjack and hookers. It's quite ridiculous, and it's really pathetic. Because honestly, at this point, Venezuela is in the dumps, almost literally, and Richard Branson's trying to help. And obviously, yes, Richard Branson, Maduro is worried about his authority being questioned, but yeah, I don't think holding a rival, if he really wanted to gain more power, he'd probably actually have to go support it. Because then people would be like, okay, well, so maybe our president or whatever our dictator does care about our lives. But that doesn't seem the case. And now speaking about one versus another, there's this whole infighting that's going on here in the UK, which has kind of got me scratching my head. It seems like there's a lot of infighting amongst Labour, the Conservatives, and UKIP. So we've seen it happen throughout the last few months. UKIP had the whole challenge of Nigel Farage, who's now started the Brexit Party, and he's challenged Sherrod Batten. And then there's also a little infighting that goes on in UKIP, but that was the major one, and that's still going on for some reason. Frankly, I'm angry at Nigel Farage because of a few reasons. One, that he insulted every single attendee of the Brexit march, despite having no proof. He tarred them all with the same brush. He called them all skinhead tattooed thugs, which in itself is an incredibly dismissive and stereotypical and elitist point of view. Because who cares? Even if it was all skin-headed tattooed thugs, what kind of bigoted asshole are you to think that you're better than them? They are individuals and citizens of the United Kingdom as well. That pisses me off in itself. The other side is that Nigel Farage insisted that UKIP MEPs signed something where if they ever left UKIP, they would pass up their seat and give it to another member of UKIP. Nigel Farage has not done this. He has not given up his seat since leaving UKIP. It's extremely hypocritical. Extremely hypocritical. And then the Conservatives, I mean, their infighting is less severe because they have this whole this thing. I don't know too much about the Conservative Party, but someone mentioned how they know how to keep their ranks. Even when they disagree, they keep their ranks. They don't question their leader. Which, honestly, that's not a great thing. You're not supposed to be a blind follower. Sometimes, you've got to separate the wheat from the chaff, as they say. Or chaff, whatever. Yeah. Now, the recent one is this little Labour thing. So Jeremy Corbyn's been a questionable leader for a while. And now just today, 7 Labour MPs have left the party. And that's come with its own set of ridiculous and hilarious events. But I just find it really interesting because it's like all the major political parties in the UK. I know UKIP's not a major party, but all the major parties in the United Kingdom right now are going through some serious turbulence, serious issues. And I find it quite interesting because it's like Brexit is dividing the parties within themselves. And it's quite a fascinating thing. To me, anyway. Not that it's a good thing, but So another thing I saw, actually, is it was quite a funny thing to me. There was this one of these fear-mongering articles going around about will UK citizens get healthcare if living in the EU? And it's kind of like, are they going to be in trouble? Are they going to be deprived of their healthcare? And I just look at that and I think about it, and I'm just thinking, well, it's kind of like saying, I don't know, the way I see it, it would be like saying, will UK citizens get to keep their job if living in the EU? Now, it may sound like a weird argument, but I'm just like, well, that's dependent on the person that hired them. In the same way, the healthcare depends on the person providing the bloody healthcare. In this case, the EU or the nation they reside in. Now, I'm sure that the UK will say that EU nationals living in the UK will still get healthcare because they will probably be nice about that. But why do they look at this? I just find it crazy that they choose to say, oh, this is the UK's fault. Because of Brexit, is the UK citizens in the EU going to be deprived of their healthcare? Well, that depends on the nation that they are in, doesn't it? I mean, some of the EU nations don't even have any sort of healthcare that's provided for you anyway. So, yeah. And just to cover one last story for the day. This one has been going around for the last few days, and it's actually just a couple hours ago all come to a interesting conclusion, and I don't know if it's finished. We'll have to see as the week goes on. And this is a story of Shamima, Begum, I don't know, Begum. I'm just going to say Begum because that's the one that comes to me. But yeah, so Shamima Begum, as you may have heard, she left the UK to join ISIS and become an ISIS bride or something along them lines. And she had 2 kids, or she lost 2 children, and she's now pregnant with a 3rd, although I think she had the child recently. And she wants to come back to the UK after joining a terrorist organization. Now, my initial answer to that is hell no. But I got thinking about it, because I like to take these things seriously. I don't like to just kind of say, no, that's it, blah, done. I like to just kind of divulge into give a bit of nuance. And I thought about it, and I just thought, okay, well, the one thing I think needs to happen is there needs to be consequences. So she might come back to the UK, but she does not come back scot-free. She gets in trouble. Of course, she gets in a buttload of trouble because, you've joined a terrorist organization. That's not okay. Never mind the fact that she didn't actually say that she thought the stuff that they did was wrong and bad, but, you can make an argument for her indoctrination. Which moves me on to my next point. I believe quite heavily in rehabilitation and redemption, especially in the prison system. I believe that people need to be able to work their way back to a normal, unaffected life. And the reason for this is because if you take something away from someone, they have no reason to try and get it. If you prevent someone from living a normal life. So, for example, Shamima has no reason to want to be loyal to the UK if the UK will not allow her to work back to that. If that makes any sense. So the way I would kind of put it is, I believe the UK should be forgiving, but not naive. Don't for a second believe that Shamima is like happy to embrace the UK values all over again. I'd be very suspicious. Now, all these points of views and opinions of mine were kind of made irrelevant 2 hours or so ago. I think it was about 3 hours now, when it came to light that Shamima's family have received a letter from the Home Office saying that her UK citizenship was being revoked. Now, that is quite the development. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I'm not going to reject that. I think, okay, fair enough. That's definitely a consequence. So maybe not the one I would have taken, but it is not the worst. It's not, because that is a consequence, and so I'm happy with that. It doesn't leave any path for rehabilitation or redemption, but it also is more likely to dissuade future citizens of the UK who think that they can get off, go join a terrorist organization, and come back without any consequence, because that's not going to happen. But yeah, we're going to have to see how this develops throughout the week. I'm curious to see about that. Now, I'm going to come back next week with another series, episode, whatever, of Off the Cuff. If you have any opinions or feedback or suggestions on some of the stuff I've talked about, then please do comment down below. Leave your opinions and I'll get back to you. I'll leave links to some stuff that I've talked about. I'm honestly having trouble remembering all the stuff I've talked about so far. So I'll probably leave a link to that white privilege article I read, as well as the public education one I read, and some of the stuff about the BBC article on the penny and the garment, and Cradle to Cradle and They Used to Last 50 Years, which are all articles I read. The stuff on the lab-grown meat. I'm not going to go through all these. I'll leave a bunch of links down below. And if I miss any, if you want to hear any, if there's anything I've talked about here that you thought, yeah, I wanted to actually read up on that, please let me know if I've missed anything. And I'll be back next week. Now, I'm probably going to miss this because I'm not going to do an update before next week, but Tommy Robinson will be supposedly exposing the BBC on Saturday. I'm very much looking forward to that. I truly hope that he does have some beautiful evidence, but I will wait to see what he has, because no offense to Tommy Robinson, he has previously been very excited about something that's coming up before, and then I've seen it and it's been like kind of underwhelming. So I'm not going to jump ahead. I'm going to wait till I see what he's got. But yeah, till next week, that's all from me. Stay tuned, and I'll just say the whole usual: subscribe if you want to see updates. Honestly, don't subscribe because YouTube will be a dick and prevent you from seeing it. Though a subscription would be nice, so I can keep count of how many people are actually watching. I would recommend you check out some RSS feeds, because there's a much better way to stay updated on YouTube. I literally have an RSS feed with all my favorite political pundits, political people, and so on, and a bunch of music channels as well. And literally, I've got like 251 songs I haven't listened to yet because they were uploaded and I just haven't got around to it. But they will remain there forever until I listen to them. But yeah. So it's worth doing, because that YouTube can't manipulate it. Anyway, till next week, have a good one.